Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fresh. My name is Nia Malika Dixon. I'm an independent writer, director, and producer here in Los Angeles. I am originally from Baltimore, and I am a Black Muslim woman. And here at Fresh, we have a weekly live broadcast where we discuss different film and television from the perspective of storytelling and from your favorite streaming platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime. We've done Paramount Plus and several others, including Hulu. You name it, we've done it. And if you've missed any of our live broadcasts, the replay is available here on IGTV. So go back and watch some of the replays. They are not going to be up there for long, though. However, soon we're going to migrate them to our website. But in the meantime, we've shifted from television shows to film. And today we're continuing our discussion about action films, which happen to have women in the lead, including women of color. And this week we're talking about Gunpowder Milkshake, which is on Netflix. And like I said, this broadcast discusses film from the angle of a storyteller, because as a storyteller, I love story, and not just creating film and television, but watching film and television. But also the reason why this broadcast exists is so that other creators, such as myself, who are a part of the underrepresented population, whether you're Black or Muslim or a woman or LGBTQ or disabled or any marginalized demographic, this broadcast was created to provide you insight when creating your projects based on how well or how not so well these popular top tier storytelling and not so top tier storytelling projects do it. And so today we're going to talk about one of my favorite genres, which is action films. And like I said on a previous broadcast, I love action and I love thrillers. And so last week when we talked about The Old Guard, I geeked out a lot because, first of all, it was directed by a Black woman whom I admire greatly, Gina Prince Bythewood. And second of all, the storytelling was excellent. Like, if you are a fan of action films like I am, most often storytelling kind of is not a big priority in those kinds of films. However, I really believe it should be, because that's what makes a great film. And one of the things that I found when comparing, which is not so fair, I guess, because, I mean, how can you compare to Gina Prince Bythewood? Come on. The Old Guard was just spectacular. But when I found myself comparing this week's film, Gunpowder Milkshake, to The Old Guard, it just didn't measure up for me. And I don't want you to think that we're going to be bashing Gunpowder Milkshake, because there are some great things about the film. And I'm not one for spoiling a film for people. I don't like to do that, and I don't like it when people do that for me. So you won't get a lot of spoilers, and you won't get me talking about everything that's negative. But what I will do is discuss some of the things that fell short for me from the perspective of a storyteller, because, like I said, that's what this broadcast is all about. So now, let's jump right into it. If you're not familiar with Gunpowder Milkshake, it was pretty hyped up on Netflix because it boasts a great cast. I just want to say that the cast is phenomenal. Like, I just feel like this cast deserves every kind of amazing written film that they can get, especially Angela Bassett, because Angela Bassett deserves her own action film, in my opinion. And if I had it my way, Gina Prince Bythewood would direct that one. Unfortunately, that's not what we got, but Gunpowder Milkshake was entertaining because it had these powerhouse actresses: Angela Bassett, Michelle Yeoh, Karen Gillan, Lena Headey, and Carla Gugino. I hope I said her name right. And these actors, they have never disappointed me. And I'll just say, this film, they didn't disappoint either. So they did phenomenal in their craft. That is not what I think fell short in the film. Just want to start off with that. Basically, when it comes to action films and story, usually it's all about plot. And this film, Gunpowder Milkshake, is all about Plotty McPlotterson. Plottity plot plot plot. There was a lot of plot. And I feel like action films feel like they have to have a lot of plot. But not necessarily to entertain your audience do you have to make sure your plot is thick. For me, as an audience, the plot and the story weaving should all go hand in hand. But for some reason, Gunpowder Milkshake was very, very, very heavy on plot and very, very, very light on story development. So there were a lot of action sequences, there were a lot of fight scenes, there were lots of spectacular fight scenes, I might add, because these women really kicked a lot of ass. There were a lot of scenes with gunplay that didn't disappoint. So there were plenty of set pieces and action sequences that really delivered. However, when it came to the dialogue, it was often a little stilted, and I didn't really feel like I could like sink my teeth into the story. The dialogue was a little stilted. There were a lot of cliches, and unfortunately there was some inherent misogyny. And I know that, for action, you want to have certain characters portray different kinds of tropes, but it was very much embedded in the way that the characters were crafted. So like the way that the main villain spoke about women, it was just so cringeworthy to me. I felt like, what am I watching at several moments? So I just honestly had to take a backseat to a lot of the dialogue. And there were some misplaced wannabe feminist tropes, like it felt like the writer tried really hard to put certain elements in there that elevated women in a way when it came to these action sequences, because villains will speak a certain way, and then our main character, played by Karen Gillan, she was supposed to speak in a tone that delivered feminist ideals. However, it just came across to me as inauthentic. It just really didn't ring true. Like, for example, where she was saying that women are fair game when it came to her being an assassin. That to me felt kind of forced. But that's just me. Take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt as a storyteller and as a person who's an audience member. So this is just from my perspective. I, on the other hand, would have liked a little bit more nuance, especially in the character development, because there wasn't a lot of character development at all for me. And then a lot of the story elements lacked cohesion. So, for example, the main character, her motivation for becoming an assassin was kind of swept under the rug. Like, we didn't really delve into that. It was just very glossed over. This is what her mom did, so now this is what she does. She kind of fell into it because of who was taking care of her, blah, 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 and it was just kind of swept aside. However, if you've watched our broadcast, you know that for me, story is character. So if your character is fully developed, your story is going to be fully developed, and it just follows that way. And so because I felt like Karen Gillan's character, her name was Sam, was very much two-dimensional, her motivations for doing what she did just didn't reach my heart. Like, it didn't really take root. And so like it just felt very surface. And on more than one occasion, I found myself asking, why is she even doing this? Like, what is she doing? Why is she chasing these people? Like, it just didn't have the cohesion that I felt that other stories have had. And I'm talking action, I mean, even when I watched Atomic Blonde, which is another action film that I love, and it just happens to star Charlize Theron, who was also in The Old Guard. I mean, it's not as great as The Old Guard, don't get me wrong. But it was pretty badass. Like, and the story development to me was a lot more developed than Gunpowder Milkshake. So, you know, when it comes to these stories, I feel like a lot of effort should be put into developing your main character, especially if she's going to carry the whole film. And so that's where I stand on that. I do want to say, though, that the way that the characters worked together, they were an ensemble, especially the ladies in the library. They did a pretty good job. And for what it's worth, those characters were not meant to be as fully fleshed out as Sam's character. So they did, Michelle Yeoh, Angela Bassett, and Carla Gugino, they did a great job with delivering their characters, and their motivation was pretty clear. So I feel like if this were a story that were presented to me to like doctor or to like make some changes to make it a little better, I would have given Sam a little bit more screen time to develop her motivations, to fully flesh out what her needs are, you know, so that we can, as the audience, understand why we're thick in this firefight right now, you know. And then her motivations for helping Emily were pretty clear based on the parallel that was drawn between her character, Sam, and, you know, the backstory of being abandoned by her mom a little bit, and then having the same thing happen to the little girl in the story who she rescues, that we understand why she rescues her, because she sees a little bit of herself in that. So like, let's have a little bit more consistency when it comes to that kind of story element. You know, that character development is so important. So creatives, when you're thinking about your project and your film, if you have an action story, no matter what the story is, make sure that your main character's motivations are fully fleshed out for us as the audience, you know. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting there thinking like, I don't get why we're doing this. And that's not something that you want your audience to think, because you want them along for the ride 100%. So that's what I feel about the character development. Now, moving into other story elements like the music, like I said a few moments ago, the story elements were there, but they just lacked the cohesion needed to keep the story going. And the music to me just felt a little bit overpowering. So sometimes, you know, in the story, the music is a motivator for the character, or it also it instigates an emotional response from us as the audience as to what we should be feeling in this moment. And so I felt like the music was forceful, like it was a little too loud for me, and it distracted me from the actual drama that was going on the screen. And in some occasions, like for example, for the firefights, when she was shooting, there were sequences where the music felt like it worked, but I still felt like it was just a little bit invasive. But that could just be me, you know. I was seeking a little bit more nuance and a little bit more subtlety when it came to the music, and that could have made things flow a little bit easier for me. Now, like I said a few moments ago, comparing this week's film to last week's film is just not fair, because, you know, the old guard is the old guard. And the way that the music worked with last week's film was a lot more seamless to me. So I feel like if this film would have, I mean, the score was okay. Even the score was a little loud, though. But if the film would have woven the music throughout in a way that was less obvious, that would have worked better for me. And there were a lot of like cheeky pop culture references that I just like felt took me out of the story as well. So any kind of element that takes you out of the story as an audience is just not a good look, right? Because you want the audience to be immersed in the story. You want them to feel like they're in a whole nother world and be grounded in that world. And it just wasn't going well for me. Like, I kept looking at the time, which is another thing because this film is kind of long. And then if the story flowed so well, I would have lost track of time. If the setting was a little bit more anchored, I would have felt a little bit more grounded, you know. And then some of the pop culture references may not have been as obvious. well, I mean, giving Angela Bassett's character the name anime was kind of, it just took me out. Like, I mean, I get the reference, but it just didn't feel appropriate to me, because it's from another film. And the fact that that was a biopic based on a real person, like, I don't know, it just didn't feel appropriate to me. But like I said, this is just how I feel about it. So take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt. Now, if we had a little bit more time to develop these characters, maybe the name anime might have had a little bit more gravity to it, perhaps. But again, these were secondary characters, and so that really isn't the space for the character development. I mean, it depends on what kind of film you're making. And because it's an action film, your secondary characters aren't meant to be as fully fleshed out as the main character anyway. So, but all in all, I feel like this was a typical action film. And there were a lot of great action sequences, a lot of great fight sequences, but I just wanted it to be a little bit more, I wanted it to be a lot more engaging. And a lot more interesting. It didn't take root in my heart like the old guard did. It didn't really get me thinking about certain things. I didn't think deeply about the character and her motivations, which is super important when it comes to storytelling, because as an audience, that's why we're watching. We oftentimes connect ourselves to the main character. We're going on this journey for a cathartic experience. And so, like, if we as the audience don't relate to our main character, if we don't really get why we're going on this journey, then it's kind of an in and out. And to say it was kind of like drinking a milkshake at the risk of being corny. It was sweet, it was fun to watch. It was what it was. It wasn't a full course meal. Let's put it that way. Although I do want to add that I feel like there were some really great camera movements for an action film that definitely deserves kudos. And the lighting was great. The color scheme was pretty. There were some great things to discuss about this film. Like I said, the fight sequences were expertly done. The camera movements were pretty cool. And I have to say, I love that those three ladies, Angela Bassett, Michelle Yeoh, and Carla Gugino, they really did their thing. It was pretty dope. So I'm going to leave it at that. So let's end this broadcast, because, I don't like to make them too long. And just for the sake of fresh, I want to say I enjoyed the fight sequences, and I loved watching those ladies perform. I just wanted to have a little bit more story, because this is all about story, and to have it to be a little bit more engaging. And let's say that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are a creative from any background and you want to discuss film and you would love to join me on Fresh, I am inviting several filmmakers to join me on some special holiday broadcasts so that we can talk about your favorite film. And if you're interested, please DM us here at Audace Entertainment. And there's more to come about that. But for next week, we have a film in the queue, and I can't wait to talk about it. And I hope that you do get a chance to watch Gunpowder Milkshake and make your own conclusions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day. Bye.